Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to what I think is going to be a truly fascinating conversation. I'd like to welcome those people who are in the room and also those who are watching online. And we are extremely honored today to have the Prime Minister of Vietnam, Prime Minister Pham Minh Chinh, to talk to us. He has made a tremendous effort to be here, I should say. He has not only come a long way, but he's also appeared, even though the cold weather in Davos has been quite a shock to the system, and he's struggling with not feeling so well. So, first of all, can I say a very big thank you on behalf of us all for coming here today. It's great to have you.
I have to thank you in turn because you have given me such an auspicious discussion today with the effort of both sides, the organizers. Thank you for that.
Thank you. Well, Vietnam is an absolutely fascinating country because in the last 40 years, in the period of Doi Moi, you have achieved quite remarkable transformation of the economy and really blazed a trail in terms of economic development. And before our conversation today, I spoke to a number of large investors about Vietnam, and they all praised the path the country has been on in the last 4 decades. They also, however, raised questions for the future. You had 7% growth last year. You're aiming for 10 to 12% next year. You have good FDI figures. You have good investment, inflation, and fiscal figures. So that's all wonderful. The questions that the investment community has is, firstly, there has been political upheaval in the last couple of years, which has hurt the economic trajectory. And the new government that's in place is bringing stability, but they primarily come from a non-economic background, a security background. So the first question the investors have is, how will you deliver good economic policies going forward? The second question is that obviously there has been questions about the environmental cost of this rapid development. So I'd love to ask you that. And the third question that people ask is, you have benefited by many global companies appreciating your developments and moving supply chains to Vietnam. But in an era where we have growing US-Chinese confrontation and geopolitical problems, how will you navigate that going forward? So these are the questions that the investors here in Davos are keen to hear about. But I know that you actually wanted to start with a different question. So, out of respect to the long journey you've traveled, I will start with a question that you really wanted to talk about first, which was artificial intelligence. So, I understand that you're keen to tell us, first of all, about how Vietnam is grappling with the challenge of an intelligent age. So perhaps you can start by telling us about that, and then we can move on to some of the other questions that have been raised by participants in the forum when they look at the remarkable development of Vietnam in recent years.
Thank you for the questions and a very fascinating discussion. I can say that Vietnam is a developing country. Vietnam is an economy in transition. From a very low starting point. After 40 years of war, 30 years of embargo, Vietnam must therefore make a lot of effort over the past decades to be where we are today. That is the common effort of the entire Vietnamese nation. In the spirit of great national unity and solidarity, the greater the challenge, the greater the effort we put to it. That is a Vietnamese culture.
Năm 2014 thì
In 2024,
rất nhiều cái khó khăn.
a lot of challenges face Vietnam. On top of the global landscape, there's also a change in the generation of leadership
Đây là cũng là một cái
without warning.
chúng tôi nhanh chóng ổn định tình hình,
This was a difficulty, but we were able to rapidly
không bị gián
put
đoạn
things under control so that everything continues as they are, so that
và lại tăng
our
lên tinh
work
thần đoàn
is
kết.
continued and the effort and the solidarity is maintained across the whole country
Khó khăn.
within the difficult backdrop. This, of course, was followed by the Yagi super typhoon, which caused a lot of destruction over the 26 provinces in the northern part of Vietnam.
Đấy là cái mà tôi cũng nói qua về cái
So that
năm 24 là như vậy.
is Vietnam's
Cái
landscape in 2024.
đấy cái năm 24 chúng tôi có hai cái đặc điểm lớn
That is the two events that characterized 2024.
đổi liên tục. Đấy.
There were a lot of changes in leadership, and
Tàn phá của cái cơn bão.
then there was the Yagi super typhoon.
Tác động và những cái tiêu cực khác thì
And there are other things as well. But that is what we share with the rest of the world.
thông minh.
Now, on artificial intelligence,
Tôi nghĩ là cái
I think that the smart era is opening up. And
về cái suy nghĩ của mình thôi.
what I think personally on this is that
Thông minh là chính trị thì
this is an era where there has to be political stability, where there has to be peace rather than war,
phát triển nhanh nhưng mà phải
because that would facilitate rapid economic development and sustainable development.
khai thác có hiệu quả.
That is also an age where we have to make good use of the environment to ensure sustainability.
Xã hội thì phải đảm bảo
It is an era where we have to ensure social progress and equality to leave no one behind. That is what I believe that will characterize the smart era.
thông minh,
It goes hand in hand with artificial intelligence, that goes hand in hand in turn
dữ liệu.
with database.
Cho nên là chúng tôi
And
lớn nhất của chúng
the
tôi,
challenge that faces today
tôi đưa ra cái tầm nhìn
is that we need to come up with a vision
đến năm 2000
that by 2045,
nước đang
Vietnam
phát triển.
must be a developed, high-income country.
Bối cảnh mà xuất phát điểm thấp,
And given
kinh tế đang chuyển đổi,
how low our starting position is,
cái sức chống chịu,
given that we are an economy in transition and our resilience is still limited, the greatest challenge we have is concerning big data, a big database, because without that we cannot have a good foundation for artificial intelligence.
thông minh của người Việt Nam thì phải là cơ sở dữ liệu.
And the Vietnamese artificial intelligence has to be built upon a Vietnamese database.
Vẫn còn khó khăn,
And
thách thức liên quan đến xây dựng
there are still difficulties that we are facing in creating and sharing a database,
trí tuệ thông minh của toàn dân tộc,
or to, out of this, develop
ra cái trí tuệ thông minh.
a national artificial intelligence
Cái mà chúng tôi
and connect it with
khó khăn nhất hiện
the
nay
database of all ministries, agencies, localities, and so forth. So the big question here is to build a big database for the Vietnamese nation. So what we're doing here is we're issuing
pháp liên quan đến cái
legal instruments and policies on the development of artificial intelligence. And this is doing very well over the past 2 years. The second thing that we have to do is to build a national database to connect everything within Vietnam together.
sẽ hoàn thành cái trung
And we hope to be able to
trên cái nền tảng
complete a national database by June this year. And based on that, we can establish Vietnam's own national artificial intelligence. So that is what I think on this topic.
Well, thank you. I think many people inside Vietnam would applaud this. In the business community, there has long been a concern about the fact that much of the manufacturing activity has been low value at the lower end of the supply chain. However, one of the features of Vietnam in recent years is that R&D investment has been much lower than elsewhere in East Asia. Do you plan as a government to create incentives, financial incentives, to encourage more research and development investment, or to find other ways to encourage companies to raise their level of R&D activity?
Vâng, về cái nghiên cứu phát triển thì đúng.
Yes, on research and development,
Đầu tư cho nghiên cứu phát triển.
we are admittedly not investing as much on R&D compared to other countries in the region,
Cái đặc điểm lớn nhất chúng tôi
because One of the biggest things that characterize Vietnam is that Vietnam has a very low starting point, and we are a developing country in transition. And that means there are difficulties when it comes to R&D. With that being said, over the past few years, we have been improving the legal system and policy instruments to encourage and harness resources, both private, public, and investors, both domestic and internal and international, to pour into R&D. And Vietnam has been arriving at incentive policies.
Ví dụ như Samsung
For example, Samsung
đầu tư một cái trung tâm nghiên cứu phát triển
invested into an R&D center worth several $100 million. It was open just a year back.
chúng tôi đưa ra chính sách khuyến khích
And with this incentive, they continue to invest more
nghiên cứu phát triển nữa
into another R&D center
Láng Hòa Lạc.
in the Lang Hoa Lac
Đặc biệt là
complex.
Ngài
And most notably,
khi tiếp xúc
NVIDIA, Mr. Jason Huang,
chủ yếu vào
who has been
nghiên cứu đầu
in
tư
discussion with us, he is an R&D man, and
với chúng tôi, tức là
he
chuyển giao được một số cái trung tâm nghiên cứu phát triển
was able to, and there are a number of R&D centers that are under work, and with him, and
dành một cái nguồn lực
of course we have to set aside
nghiên cứu phát triển
a certain
và cái
budget for R&D, and
ban hành một cái nghị
we have just issued a resolution
phát triển khoa học công nghệ đổi mới
concerning science, technology, R&D, innovation, and
bắt buộc
digitalization.
cho khoa học công nghệ
So this
là 2%
resolution set a 2% budget for
phát triển
research, 3 to 4% on development, and so on and so forth. And if we want not to fall behind, there has to be ample resources, financial resources,
để khuyến khích.
investing into this, and there has to be incentives and policies for this. Secondly, this also means investing into human beings. This means investing into education, training.
Đào tạo 50.000 kỹ sư, 100.000
There's a program, for example, for the training of 50,000
rồi trí tuệ nhân tạo.
engineers in semiconductor and artificial intelligence, for example.
Right. Well, if you manage to train that many engineers rapidly, I think you'll show a framework or template for many other countries. But in terms of the R&D investment, you mentioned Samsung, you mentioned NVIDIA, many other big tech companies are keen to look at Vietnam as an investment base. They have, I think, two concerns from talking to people at the event. One concern, which I'll ask you about first, is whether foreign investor rights are completely protected under Vietnamese law and treated on an equal par with domestic companies. Can you say anything to the attendees at the forum about what you're going to do to reassure foreign investors that they will be treated on an equal level with domestic investors going forward? Legally.
Vâng, cái câu hỏi này là rất hay.
This is a very interesting question indeed.
Chúng tôi phải xây dựng, trước hết là phải xây dựng
Of course, this begins with
cái quyền
lawmaking to ensure equality between domestic and international investors.
trí tuệ.
This also means ensuring
Có cái
IP rights. This is part of every
điều khoản mà đàm phán khó khăn nhất.
FTA, and this is always the hardest thing to negotiate. For example, when we negotiate with the US, this topic alone took 5 years.
Thì đấy là cái thứ nhất.
IP rights, that took 5 years.
Hạ tầng. Thì chúng tôi phải
This also means infrastructure. We have to invest into infrastructure
các công ty trong nước,
so that
các cái thành phần kinh tế trong nước cũng như là
companies,
tập đoàn kinh tế của nước ngoài hay là thành phần kinh tế nước ngoài
both Vietnamese and international, would be able to make use of these infrastructure on an equal basis,
thị trường
on a market basis,
giá trị quy luật cung cầu.
respecting the rules of value, supply, demand, and competition.
Right. Well, I think certainly everyone here will be interested to see what happens on that respect with the government. The second question people are concerned about here is that Vietnam has been a very attractive alternative location for investment as tensions between China and America have increased. Now, that means that Vietnam now has one of the largest trade surpluses with America in proportional terms of any country. So are you concerned that you will become a target for the new administration in America? Because we've had indications that they want to focus on countries with big trade surpluses with America. And can you reassure the companies that are the international companies that are putting money into Vietnam that they won't find themselves caught in the same set of trade conflicts that they've had with China and the US in the future?
Vâng, bà nói rất đúng.
You are very right. Of course, Vietnam is
Cái thặng dư thương mại
ranking third in trade surplus vis-a-vis the US.
thứ hai là Mexico và thứ ba là đến chúng tôi.
China, Mexico, then it comes Vietnam.
Với Mỹ là hơn 100 tỷ.
More than 100 billion.
Thì đây là một cái bài.
So this is a big question.
Cái tình hình thế giới
as the global landscape may change, an administration may change, and but at the same time, we do not fear what is to come, because with the US, we have proposed a few measures to rebalance trade. For example, we are purchasing more planes from the US because we are developing the Vietnamese tourism industry as a spearhead sector, which means we need a larger fleet, and that means purchasing from Boeing, which is an American company. We seek to buy 50 to 100 planes over the next 10 years, and this will help to rebalance these bilateral trade. And there are other high-tech items of the US that we're interested in as well, so there are solutions in place. There are political solutions and diplomatic solutions to bolster mutual understanding between the two countries. There are economic solutions, and there are institutional solutions. This means trade agreements that we have been signing with other countries, including with the US. We are negotiating an adjustment of agreements we have signed with the US. So with all of this in mind, we do not have too much concern about this. And of course, we do not want trade wars in the world. This era, this smart era, should be one without unhealthy competition. It must be an era of stable politics, an era of peace, not war, an era of stable economic development, an era where the development among countries are in balance and where countries can stand together against the challenge of our time. I think that would and should characterize the smart era today, because in every time there's difficulties, it would behoove us to work together. That is why Vietnam's motto is we have to share benefits and harmonize risk. Because in times of trade war, it would cause a lot of trouble, but Vietnam's President Ho Chi Minh has a very famous poem that roughly translates goes that there's nothing difficult as long as our heart is in the right place. Whether we are digging the mountain or leveling a sea, as long as there's a will, there's a way. There's a lot of things that we have in place. There are political solutions, economic solutions, and we have all these in place to avoid trade conflicts in the world today.
Right. Well, I think everybody in the Congress Center would thoroughly agree with that sentiment. I don't think many people here want to see trade wars at all, so you're speaking to a group of people who strongly agree with you. However, it's quite striking that the Trump administration has already, just today, last 24 hours, announced 25% tariff against Mexico, which is the second biggest trade surplus. They're threatening a whole series of tariffs against China. Until now, they've actually not mentioned Vietnam, which is quite striking. And I asked some of the Trump team why, and they said, well, they're waiting to see whether Vietnam will be friendly to America or to China. and they're also waiting to see what happens with Mexico and others. So I have two questions, Prime Minister. The first is, are you going to be able to stay friends with both America and China? And my second question is, have you spoken yet to the team of Donald Trump about what Vietnam can do to keep yourself off the list of people that Trump tweets about? Because thus far, I don't think there's been any tweets at all about you yet. There's been plenty about other countries, but thus far, I should congratulate you of staying out of the president's tweet stream. So, can you be friends with both America and China? And have you spoken with the Trump administration yet?
Rất là cảm ơn bà. Cái câu hỏi này thì
Thank you. Very, very fascinating question. Now, first, Vietnam's foreign policy is one of independence, self-reliance, diversification, and multilateralization to be a good friend and reliable partner of all countries around the world. Second,
là thành viên có trách nhiệm với
Vietnam is to be a responsible member of the international community for peace, cooperation, and development. So, that means we'll be friends to all. To China, to the US, to Mexico, to all.
là cái đường lối đối ngoại.
This is Vietnam's foreign policy line.
Cho nên là chúng tôi
And
tất cả các nước đều là bạn.
all countries, our friend and a trusted partner. This means China, this means the US, and in truth, over the past years, Vietnam have been keeping everything in balance. There's no issue over here, and this has brought about benefit to peace, cooperation, and development for both US and China and Vietnam at the same time.
Vấn đề cụ thể thì
Now,
tôi nghĩ
on the detail, I think we are different from China, and we are different from Mexico.
Mexico thì có cái vấn đề với biên giới.
Mexico has a border issue, has a border with
Những vấn đề về kinh tế thì
crime.
vấn đề về biên giới có
It
vấn
has,
đề về tội
on
phạm.
top of economic issues, we don't have these issues vis-a-vis the US.
Thực ra phải Hoa Kỳ phải có trách nhiệm với chúng tôi, phải là hàn gắn.
If you look into it, the US has a responsibility to help Vietnam address war legacy issue. They have a responsibility to help Vietnam grow after all the devastation brought against Vietnam over 4 years.
Vừa nâng cấp đối tác
We have just upgraded relations to the US to a comprehensive strategic partnership.
Hoa Kỳ ứng xử với chúng tôi
I don't think there's a reason
tương xứng với cái gì.
that the US should treat us in a way that is not reciprocal to what we have treated them.
Chúng tôi cũng không
I think that is smart
là cạnh tranh trực tiếp
in
với
that sense.
lại Hoa
And
Kỳ.
unlike China, we are not a direct competitor to the US, not in trade, not in investment.
Chúng ta nhìn vào sự thật.
This is looking at the facts as they are.
Cũng là cái thặng dư, nhưng mà cái thặng dư không lớn như của Trung Quốc.
And our trade surplus vis-a-vis China, vis-a-vis the US, is not that large.
Thì chúng tôi cũng
In
hơn 100
absolute
tỷ.
terms, no.
Nếu mà
Do you plan, have you spoken yet with the Trump team? Do you plan to go to Mar-a-Lago to see the president? And I have to ask a question, having just been in Japan, where I spent many years in Japan, many Japanese now say, what a pity that Ishiba-san, the leader of Japan, stopped playing golf 30 years ago. If only he played golf like Prime Minister Abe, Japan would be in a much better position. Do you plan to play golf with President Trump?
Vâng. Cái thứ nhất là cái
First,
chúng tôi cũng đã thảo luận với lại phía
we've
Hoa
talked
Kỳ
with the
mà
US
trực tiếp
side
là Tổng thống Donald Trump.
and even the
Ngài Tổng
president
bí thư Tô Lâm
himself.
chúng tôi đã
A general
có
secretary
cái cuộc điện đàm,
had a telephone
có cái trao đổi
conversation,
và các
had exchanges with President Trump.
cái tiếp cận thì có thể là có
And-
những cái công khai, có những cái còn đang trong cái quá trình tiếp cận với nhau.
And we are still also figuring out our approaches, but in fact, we made the initial contacts with the Trump administration, and we have no concern about it.
Cái đấy là cái mà đối với Hoa Kỳ thì chúng tôi nghĩ là
Regarding the US,
xử lý được.
we think we can handle our relationship with the US,
Ai lợi dụng cái mối quan hệ này
and we will let no one to exploit
mà làm phức tạp
this
thêm vấn đề.
relationship to further complicate the situation.
quan hệ với các nước khác.
But on the other hand, we also enjoy good cooperation and relations with other countries, but without disappointing the U.S. in the spirit of harmonized interest and sharing risk.
Để mà chơi golf mà mang lại
To
cái
play
lợi ích
golf,
cho dân tộc.
and if it can bring about the interest to the country, the benefit to the country, and I can play golf the whole day long.
Right, but I think make sure that when you do play golf, you have plenty of television cameras and make sure you let President Trump win. Or maybe offer to build a whole bunch more golf courses in Vietnam.
Nhưng mà tôi lúc đấy tôi không ngại là vì tôi chơi golf để vì mang.
I won't be afraid because I play golf to bring about the benefit to our people, to our countries. So don't worry about it.
Right.
I stand ready to be broadcasted,
Vì cái quốc
to be on the media for the interest of our nation and
Well,
people.
40, 50 years ago, we had ping pong for peace in China. We can now have golf for peace. So, on a more serious note, though, the other question I want to ask, we're almost out of time, the environmental questions. Vietnam, tragically, has suffered directly the consequence of climate change. What do you plan to do to help address these issues? Because obviously your rapid development, your such impressive development has come at some environmental damaging cost.
Vâng, có thể nói là Việt Nam
Yes,
là một trong
it is true that Vietnam is one of the 5 countries worst affected by climate change going forward.
thì chúng tôi
Climate change and sea level rise because we have a coastline of 3,000 kilometers. So Vietnam is one of the countries
do nước biển.
that would stand to be
Thì, chúng tôi
damaged by sea level rise.
chúng tôi đã cùng chung tay với thế giới
Vietnam has made the commitment along with the international community to net zero,
để, chuyển đổi xanh.
and we've made the commitment to green transition, green transport, and green production, green manufacturing, as I said before.
Rồi bảo vệ môi trường.
This means protecting the environment.
Rồi còn cái đề
And
án cụ thể thì chúng tôi
Vietnam,
đề án cụ thể, ví dụ
when you go into the details, in the Mekong Delta, for example, Vietnam has just
hectare
got
lúa
a project for 1 million hectare of high quality, low emission rice cultivation to help to contribute to global food security while still ensuring green
đề án
farming. We have another project, another program to address issues
lún sạt
that has to do with droughts,
ngập úng
floods, and
đều có cả. Hay là ví dụ
and land depression.
thì nó tàn phá các nước các
Let's take another example. The Yagi super typhoon caused great damage to the northern provinces in Vietnam, caused a lot of landslides. So we have a program in place to combat landslide,
cho người dân
to protect
an toàn.
the environment for the people.
Thì đều có những cái
So we have
ngoài ra
detailed programs on the ground.
thế giới về cái
And we're also working with the international community
phát triển cái năng lượng
on the development of
gió ngoài khơi.
clean energy, for example, offshore wind and solar power,
Thì chúng tôi không thiếu.
because we have no shortage of wind or sun. What we need is investment. What we need is
Các nhà đầu tư lớn
to bring to us major investors.
vừa qua thì cũng đã có cái hoàn thiện về cái thể chế.
So in the recent past, we have been improving the institutions to facilitate this, and
Đã tiến hành khởi động lại cái
we have restarted nuclear power generation program to ensure clean energy.
Right. Well, I think there are many people at this forum who would be delighted to cooperate with you because there's a great hunger for investing in power projects at the moment. And as I said before, a great hunger to diversify the source and the targets for those investments. So thank you very much indeed, Prime Minister. I'm very grateful for the conversation. It's been truly fascinating. I personally take away 2 or 3 key points. The first is that Vietnam has indeed had this remarkable trajectory of development in the last 4 decades, which I think everyone here in this forum would applaud. And if you do achieve your target growth rate of 10 to 12% in the next year or two, then you will truly be showing a model to the wider world. However, there obviously are some big challenges ahead, be that environmental, be that the need to invest in your research and development capabilities, to look at the legal structures around that, and to try and upgrade your manufacturing base into higher value products. And last but not least, of course, the biggest challenge is going to be navigating this very difficult tightrope in the new geopolitical order and keeping also happy and ensuring that you stay out of President Trump's Twitter feed. As I say, I should congratulate you on the skill with which you have managed to do that so far. I think everybody in the World Economic Forum would hope that you can continue to show it's possible to walk that tightrope. So, whether or not you play golf, I'll just say to you, good luck on behalf of us all, and thank you.
Vâng. Tôi
Thank you. We will develop in this new era, in this smart era, based on science and innovation and digital transformation. So this will be a very important framework. This is also a revolution.
cuộc cách mạng về khoa học công nghệ
Hand in hand with
và chuyển đổi số thì là
this,
một cuộc cách mạng
that is a revolution to
thăng bằng
keep a good tightrope between the countries and the world to bring about benefit that we share for peace, cooperation, and development.
I think if Vietnam can achieve that, then there will be many, many people wanting to know how you did it and to copy you. So, as I say, good luck. Thank you.
và chúng ta sẽ chờ đợi.
Wait and see, of course.